Okay, since we have a quorum, I call this meeting of the Oversight Committee call to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It is 8 a.m. We are holding this meeting by video conference via Zoom due to continued COVID-19 precautions. Before we start the agenda, I want to go over a few technical points. If you are not speaking, please make sure that your microphone is on mute. Please leave your cameras on for the entire meeting. This is the easiest way for us to see that we are maintaining a quorum of members. In the unlikely event that our video conference technology fails completely, we have published a call-in number on the meeting notice that we will switch to for continuing the public meeting by teleconference. CPRIT has included a copy of the meeting notice with the call-in number at the beginning of the agenda packet. Finally, if an Oversight Committee member disconnects from the meeting and cannot reconnect, please contact Michael Fisher or Terry Simeon so that they can help you to rejoin the meeting. We're moving on to roll call. I know that I just asked you to mute yourselves, but for the roll call, make sure that your microphone is on. Dr. Cummings, please proceed.
All right, we'll start with the roll call if you would indicate here when we call your name. Mr. Margot.
Here.
Dr. Hernandez.
Here.
Mr. Montgomery.
Here.
Dr. Patel.
Yeah.
Ms. Payne.
Here.
Dr. Rice.
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Members, the draft minutes from the May 20th and July 31st Oversight Committee meetings are available in your agenda packet behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 20th and July 31st Oversight Committee meetings.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Motion made by Dr. Rice. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Our next agenda item is public comment. Public feedback is critically important because CPRIT was created to help Texans. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Ms. Doyle, has CPRIT received any requests to provide public comment?
Yes, sir. We've received 2 requests for public comment. The first person will be Kathleen McBurney. She is speaking on behalf of the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. The second person speaking will be Bernice Joseph. She's the Chief Operating Officer with the Rose.
Okay.
I believe Ms. McBurney will speak first.
Ms. McBurney, you're allowed to speak now, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Kathleen McBurney, and I am a proud Texan and an even prouder cancer survivor. First, I want to say thank you very much for your commitment to the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. You may not always get to see the efforts of your work, but I'm here as living proof to show the value of it. In 2013, I was diagnosed with a very rare, very large, stage 4 inoperable head and neck cancer.
I don't know.
There were no proven systemic treatments available for my cancer.
Dr.
Hello?
You can hear someone talking over the speaker. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. There were no proven systemic treatments available for my cancer, and I was told that proton radiation was my only hope for a life, with or without cancer. I underwent proton therapy at MD Anderson in 2013, and by the beginning of 2015, the tumor was completely eradicated. A 2011 CPRIT-funded grant at MD Anderson dealing with imaging and dose delivery directly impacted the way that my treatment was given in 2013. I can also speak directly to the results of a 2015 CPRIT-funded grant, also at MD Anderson, where I had my treatment, dealing in part with the efficacy of proton therapy. Due to my original tumor's invasiveness, with traditional radiation, I would have dealt with many short and long-term side effects and would unequivocally have been blind in my right eye and deaf in my right ear. But today, by miracle and medicine, I'm neither of those things. And fast forward to a handful of additional metastatic diagnoses, 2 of them to my liver, 1 to my kidney, which were dealt with surgically and with ablations. Then in 2018, I was diagnosed with a recurrence in my jaw, also inoperable. Still, no systemic treatments and no clinical trials. For months, I was left with no treatment options. But then, my hope was stirred with a re-irradiation trial at MD Anderson using SBRT radiation. My radiation oncologist, Dr. Jack Fan, was the direct recipient of a 2015 CPRIT-funded grant using SBRT as a first line of treatment against certain head and neck cancers. I am sure that without the research and knowledge that he gained from that grant, that his re-irradiation trial may not have even been possible. A few weeks back, I had radiosurgery for a tumor on my sacrum. And on September 8th, I will be having a liver resection once again. I have cancer in my lungs. I know that I will once again be told, you have cancer. And when I am, I hope that it will be a CPRIT-funded researcher that was brought to Texas, or a CPRIT translational research grant that will find a systemic treatment for my cancer to rid my body once and for all of this dreadful disease. The cancer is moving fast, but science is moving faster, and that gives me hope. The American Cancer Society's Cancer Action Network is here to support your work. So one day, Texans like myself won't have to keep hearing the words, you have cancer. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you are doing. It is meaningful and it matters. Thank you for the time. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
The next speaker is Bernice Joseph.
Bernice Joseph, you're now allowed to talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Bernice Joseph. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a nonprofit mission-driven breast cancer screening and diagnosis organization in the Houston, Texas area. We've been in operation for 35 years now and continue to serve women, whether they have insurance or not, in providing them with quality breast health care. The reason I wanted to speak to you all this morning is that I want you to understand how very important your grant funding has been to the women of Southeast Texas. The Rose has been receiving grant funding from CPRIT since 2010. We started with Harris County and the surrounding counties We are now serving women in 41 counties across the state of Texas. Since 2010, the cancer prevention funding has allowed us to serve 18,000 women in the state of Texas. A third of those women had never had a mammogram before. That was their first mammogram ever. We have captured about 2% of cancers. 2% of those 18,000 women have had cancers. And as we know, the rural areas carry a much larger cancer burden than the urban areas. And what we have found in those rural areas where women have never had mammograms before, we were able to go to them with our mobile coaches. We've seen a higher percentage of cancers in those women. We've been able to bring them to Houston and navigate them into treatment for their cancer. And without the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas grant funding, that would be much more difficult for the Rose. And I want to thank you for your commitment to the citizens of Texas and to the women who have been the beneficiaries of your generosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. We have invited Dr. Rahman, a CPRIT prevention program grantee at the Texas Tech Health Sciences Center, to provide a presentation to the Oversight Committee today on the work she is doing. The Chief Prevention Officer will introduce Dr. Rahman. Mrs. Maggid, Ms. Maggid. You're muted. Ramona, you're muted.
How's that? Sorry about that. Good morning, members. I'd like to introduce Dr. Rahman. She joined Texas Tech University Health Science Center in 2009 and is the founding executive director of the Breast Center of Excellence, which was established in 2010. She spearheaded the development of the first Breast Center of Excellence in West Texas, accredited by the National Accreditation Program for Breast Centers. She's currently the director of UMC Cancer Center that is home to nationally accredited breast and lung centers of excellence and is developing a GI center of excellence. She maintains an active clinical research, educational, and leadership portfolio and serves on several local, regional, and national boards and committees, including the American Society of Breast Surgeons and National Consortium of Breast Centers. Her research interests include cryoablative therapy for breast cancers, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, circulatory tumor cells, and aromatase-related pathways in breast cancer. She's also received multiple prevention awards, and I'd like to now welcome Dr. Rahman. We look forward to your presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ramona. I have a whole battalion of millennial people to help me work with the Zoom thing. So I am going to see if I can share my screen. Okay, and I'm going to make it full. So can you all see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Okay. Okay, so basically we called our program Access to Breast, and then we added the cervix. So it used to be called ABC, and then it became ABC Square. So obviously for West Texans, CPRIT is really been pivotal in our ability to make some difference in West Texas. So it's going on for about a decade, and I'm trying to consolidate some of the major FYIs, hurdles, and wins, and some things that we learned during the process with you today. And these goals are relatively broad because over the course of several awards, we fine-tuned them, and process objectives and interim goals changed. But broadly, we started out with the goal of increasing the breast cancer screening rate in the target population. And as you'll see in subsequent slides, our target population expanded from where we started in 2010. Then we added the service criteria. So into breast, we added the cervical cancer screening rate. And at that time, we also went into the prevention with HPV vaccination. So as you know, this is the chart that has been prepared by CPRIT. So those color codes are the funding concentrations of the CPRIT area. So if you look at our 2010 application was for the Panhandle of Texas, which is one of the really underserved regions. As you all know, the Texas issue is a lot of geography. People have to travel very far to get to a healthcare system. And when we renewed our grant in 2014, we added cervix to that area, same area, but prevention services were increased, and continued work in that realm because of the cancer incidence that we thought was comparing to the rest of Texas was pretty high. And then we wrote another prevention grant in 2018, which is currently ongoing. We had some expansions. We added South Plains region and Central West Texas regions. As you can tell, these numbers, COG7, for example, which is the Abilene-Tyler County area, has, for some reason, very high incidence compared to the average in Texas of breast cancer, and pretty high mortality for cervical cancer. So we thought that these are the groups that needed to be addressed. Now we serve about 60 counties, and we have a pretty good team. So I'm going to just take you briefly through, utilizing some humor, but briefly through what we learned and how we got to where we got this far, which would not have been possible without CPRIT's help. So obviously, you start out a big program, everybody complains about what is the situation, healthcare access is an issue, lots of people are unfunded, driving distance are far, poverty rate is high, cultural sensitivities are in place, so we want to change them. But it really takes a lot to get to that change. And so our final product, which really 2010 was a big learning curve for us, but this is what our final product kind of looks like from the 10,000-foot view, is that we have this project team with some content expertise in terms of the cancer and the medical side of things. But we also made sure that our content expertise included people from, community organization kind of expertise in all these relationships and partnerships. And so we basically had three spokes of this big wheel. We have a bunch of service providers. Typically, those tend to be for-profit organizations. Some areas have county hospitals, and some people have mobile services, and some do not. Then we had these community organizations, and by that, I don't mean only healthcare related. We leverage other organizations that may be, school boards or sports teams or whatever else to get the word out. And then there were established venues. So there are some health fairs and some annual events that happen in certain communities anyway, and some other things that we could put in place now that we had the funding sources and a message to get out. Then we created venues that were not there. So the way that worked was that if you see those gray arrows back and forth, so the team was in constant communication, and I cannot overemphasize the communication that played a very, very important role. So some event is coming up, somebody would call the certain organization that, okay, we'll do a booth here or whatever, how we'll put it together, and the Breast Center of Excellence would get involved into that event. So we will use and leverage that event to get the message out. So those three pieces communicate vigorously together. But it was important, if you see the first spoke, which is the service provider, there is not an arrow going from the service provider to community organization and to community venues. And that was actually by design. In the very beginning, that arrow was there. So sometimes what had happened, for example, is there would be an event, some community organizers who are already aware that we have grant funding would get very excited, and services will be provided, and a bill would be generated, for example. And I realized that there were some issues because we have to follow certain guidelines, who gets what services, whether it's appropriate, whether the medical subsequent steps were taken appropriately. So we realized that the service providers, obviously, they have a business to run, and our good job is to make sure that the accountability is always in place, who gets what services according to needs and guidelines. So we made sure that our team members are involved in that aspect to make sure that the stewardship is in place. So this model worked really well for the few years that followed. So when we expanded and included COG 2 and COG 7, which would be South Plains and Central West Texas areas, we worked with the same scheme of things, but the blue things that you see here were the added on venues and counties and places that we had the same structure, same infrastructure that we already had tested that works really well. We added other places to that area, which is now the current structure. As you move on, so I'll go through this. This is the diagram that we kind of, any big project that you undertake, you have some input. So you start out with goals, you place some activities in place. You have to look at what you're getting for your money, for your effort, for your time, and what are those outcomes, and most importantly, what is the eventual impact. So I'm just going to try to walk everyone through that real quick. So the first part was the input and activities. This was very interesting because one would think that, okay, we had 26 counties. So we said, okay, how are we going to get the word out? How will we educate the people what needs to be done and convince them to have these mammogram services done? And because they were served, who is going to take the back end of it as to proper disposition of what abnormalities we find, and billing and all those sort of things. So we looked into the evidence-based strategies of process maps. Okay, how does the process work seamlessly? This was very interesting, I would say, and I've had several discussions with Ramona over time about this, is that on one hand, bureaucratic chain of command tends to be a barrier for people to have healthcare access, appointments and calls and insurance and this and that. So some steps can potentially be eliminated in terms of minimizing the barrier and enhancing access. But some steps are important for stewardship and accountability. So we went through these processes to see what is the best workflow design. Sharon has retired since then, and Sharon and I were literally scribbling to figure out who talks to what, who, when, how that happens, and we really went insane. So subsequent few slides, I will show you. The point of this slide was that the big program has a very complex process that our team at the university at the back end manages. But we had these in charge people for every little piece. So we broke this big complex process up into smaller pieces that worked together really well, but every little team of the process knew where they fit in the grand scheme of things and what is their realm of responsibility to create accountabilities and stewardship. So following few slides would be those smaller processes. So first we had process maps and the outreach event. So if there is a health fair or whatever, all our processes had, okay, we'll do these 3 steps, and people don't have to duplicate the steps. So we had some community organization and some volunteer workers with women's championship programs. They call different things in different counties. So we talked to them and we said, okay, instead of me canceling the clinic and going out to an event and teaching them who needs a mammogram, what are the screening guidelines, what does lump mean, what does this mean or that mean, these women who were already a part of the community, they had already conquered the whole cultural dynamic of their area. Why don't we make a training program for them so that they can be our educators out in the community? So our step 1 would be to get educated. The step 2, which was the stewardship step, is get qualified. So somebody know, okay, finally person X needs a mammogram. Then the question became whether they're insured or not, what is their financial guidelines we put in place. We kind of cheated some concept from the BCCS idea and expanded it a little bit to cover that donor population who may make a little too much to qualify for BCCS, but yet were unfunded. And the third step is our partner in the first spoke that I showed you, which is a provider. So when we go out for events now, our booth is a very standard arrangement of 3 tables. So the first table is manned by people who are going to educate with the guidelines, and they have these materials. And the patients or women will go through that first table. Once they recognize, yes, they qualify to have a mammogram, they'll go to a grant team table where we have a little form and we figure out what source of funding we will use for that. And then we already have partnered for that event with a provider which is close to that area. So we show up with the appointment cards, and that at the end of the event, you have booked X number of appointments. So that was our outreach map. Then continuum of care map. Okay, this mammogram happened. That's what happened. That happens at the back end. So once all the reports, so one of the things I put in place was that the no bill is ever gets paid unless I've looked at the mammogram report, which was our way of making sure that the abnormality is not missed. So the grant team, the people who were at the step 2 of our first process, will get those reports and assess who needs referral, who doesn't need referral. That's where the navigators would come into play, would be this, and the step 3 would be treatment, where we had to get creative on a case-by-case basis to find funding for treating abnormalities and cancers and high-risk lesion. Similarly, service reimbursement. The various providers would generate a bill. We have a very robust system of contracting, which was done up front. And we'll close the service loop. In other words, make sure that each HCFA matches with the services that our records show that they were provided, and the payments will be processed accordingly. Stewardship, some of those things are already in place through CPRIT. For example, the FSRs are generated. There is obviously an oversight, and there is audit. We also do our own internal audit. I actually maintain a prospective database that I'm going to show later in the presentation. And the big thing was the quality assurance, which is the last very important process, that every so often we do, all these partners meet, and we would talk about which process didn't work right, which process worked very right. We call it a hits and misses kind of meeting, and we reevaluate. Guidelines sometimes have changed or whatever, so we regroup to figure out, okay, what is our position on a certain guideline change, and we will have a robust debate, and we'll track all the outcome measures. And I pay specific attention to the NQF measures for all the cancers that we identified to make sure if something didn't happen consistently with the measure, why did that happen, who needs to get feedback, and things like that. So this all small processes actually talk to each other in this big formation. So if you look at the evaluation, we have both formative processes, process and formative evaluation and outcome, which we execute during the planning phases and execution and completion at baseline and every year. Some of the activities we measure every quarter. So moving on to the outputs and outcomes. So if you broadly look at, so these maps actually represent the areas that we serve, and the outreach, our physical presence at different events that we have done in these areas is the expanded box that you see, where we've physically been there and made some partners in that location to cover those regions. So each pin represents at least one partner in that community that we have done one or more events with in that community. And so now the communication lines are open back and forth. So it is, I am very proud of the fact that if you look at COG 2 and 7, which is in infancy compared to COG 1, our team has done a really good job at meeting and creating new partnerships in these areas. So what is the end result of all of this thus far over a decade? So what we've been able to do over this time is really over 500,000 indirect contacts. Now, because these are indirect contacts, there's going to be a bunch of duplication here. But we've done 36,000 direct contact with lay people, providers, healthcare workers, volunteers, all sorts of things. Overall, a little shy of 10,000 mammograms that have been provided, cervical screening shy of 1,500. And we found these 154 cancers or precursor lesions so far that were treated. What I'm very excited to report is that each one of these cancers is in our survivorship program. The follow-up on all these patients is 100%. Which I'm very, very excited about, because that was a hard thing to do as you run into funding issues. Vaccinations, we still struggle. As all of you know, HPV vaccination is a harder sell, but I think we are just about beginning to put a dent in that area. Panhandle is a little bit ahead compared to COG2 and 7, and we're continuing to explore new partnerships for that. So over time, this is something CPRIT should be extremely proud of, I think, is that when we were funded, if you look at where we go, and I on purpose designed the arrow to, in my head, that means progress forward. So we were funded 2010 to 2013 as when first grant was finishing, but the level of excitement about the program was so much that we had a lot of different little groups within the community that did fundraisers. I mean, car dealerships, restaurants, nail spas, they literally randomly donated a certain percentages of their income to get the program running. So by the time I wrote the second grant and got funded again, the program never stopped. So the green arrow represents the sustenance of the program with local funds. Then we got refunded and got expanded. But all these champagne colored arrows at the bottom will tell you these were the services that were new and different services for the community that were never funded by the grant, but because of the grant, the cohesive partnerships that we created, people got very creative. So we had a psychology team that manages coping skill classes for survivors, very evidence-based. The change cycle is the evidence we use to help these patients with quality of life. We actually did a prospective randomized trial impacting quality of life of the cancer survivors, which is now available to all cancer survivors, not just people who were breast or cervical cancer, or not just people who were funded by the grants. We developed some free clinic consults. So different areas, Panhandle, for example, has a monthly women's clinic, which is free of charge clinic run by Heal the City. Other areas have other venues where there are free clinics, because clinic appointments are typically not funded by our project. And then we have made some contracts with different commercial partners for genetic testing of people who have a family history of breast cancers. So those are the value-added services that are going to stay. I mean, they've already been staying for a few years. Back end of this arrow just shows when they were started. So moving on to the main impact part, if you look at that piece, I'm showing you the screenshot from my computer, but 150 flash drives to different providers throughout Texas were distributed with that on it as a part of our DI grant, which got birthed out of our funded projects. So we have, the first thing is the breast health module. So all the training of volunteers we do, those modules are available at a 6th grade reading level that anybody can use to train their volunteers. There's a slide set that they could go to a church, to an event. There's a data tracking system, which is a prospective database that's available at no cost to the end user, but it was funded by CPRIT. And then there are other resources that we have collected together. I've written a project director's guide that can hold somebody throughout the conception of an idea, and the WISE Women Training Program that's WISE stands for Women Inspiring, Serving, and Educating. So if I show you screenshots of each one of those, so the breast health modules have all those, and I last updated them in 17, and I probably updated again because every 3 years I update any new information. These modules were developed based on the questions that we get asked by women when we go out in the community. They have questions about nipple discharge or lump or pain. So we have training modules for them that's available to every Texan for that matter who wants to use it. Then we have the data tracking. I'll show you some things on that as well, that how we track our data. And then there is a user's guide to how to use that. And that database is actually Excel based by design, because Excel is a very easily available program everywhere in rural Texas. So we didn't want to go with a very fancy program, which some systems may not be compatible with. Then the checklist and forms that we developed are there. And guide is the whole book of a program guide. And these are the Wise Women Training Program. All these programs are actually available. Those slide sets are available both in English and in Spanish for anybody to use. So that was our dissemination project basically out of that. This is what the database, when you first start using it, looks like. So every new contact can get entered in there. So that looks something like this, you know, whoever the patient is, what the county is, we enter that information. And then so as you're going through the program, you're putting that in, and there are built-in reports there. So come time our quarterly reports, you literally can click each one of those reports, which helps you answer all the questions that we're supposed to fill out on the quarterly reports. So we're very excited about that. It's a very, very user-friendly database that at least 150 different providers throughout Texas have received. And it's available, you know, whoever wants it. So from that DI project, the processes and systems we developed in Panhandle were successfully funded for the projects for COG 2 and COG 7. Some processes were actually replicated in other already funded projects that they tweaked their process based on our dissemination product in Odessa area and San Angelo area. So this slide just represents how successful our dissemination has been with the products that we developed. So that's all I had to share. And I really, really have to acknowledge that none of that would be possible without the financial and advisory support that we enjoyed from CPRIT. So I think on behalf of West Texas, I really profusely thank this team.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman. Dr. Hernandez has a question, but I also have one real quick. Are you coordinating with El Paso, Texas Tech Health Science Center in El Paso?
That's a totally independent program. I occasionally talk to them, but I don't coordinate with them.
Are they? Do they have access to this data that you've set up and how?
Yes, they have access. I mean, I don't know that they're using it, but I have talked to Navkiran before that that we have this thing available and they can absolutely use it. I want to say that at that time they already had another system working for them, so I don't know if they ended up using it or not.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hernandez. Ambrosia, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I was trying. Little technical difficulties. I don't have millennials. Sorry. So
I did okay though. I did okay.
You did really good. First of all, you know, it's amazing work what your team is doing out there for the citizens of Texas. It's over 10 years worth of data, and I can't believe you have 100% people following your program, and you have all the nonprofits and you have all the local community involved, which that's the way it should be. So, and it's very robust and very productive. So I want to congratulate you and your team for an outstanding job. Did you ever contact the health districts or the counties for funding, additional funding to match what you're doing?
We contacted the health districts and counties, but it was more for outreach, not so much for funding.
Yes.
Oh, I want this to come here.
Because they do actually tax their population, and they don't hoard money, but they put money aside. It's a mandate that they have to do it in the state of Texas to take care of indigent care, but also they can also use it for other, and especially now with CARES money coming through as well, you'd be surprised how much funding there is in addition to what you're doing. This is just so you can augment what you're doing and get your program.
That's a good point. But we have gone, I mean, they are our important partners, and they've helped us with outreach. And we've leveraged some of the services that they already had that the grant program was not covering. So we've kind of worked that way. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we really used big time was the DISRIP project when it was out there.
Okay.
So we used the DISRIP project for a lot of our non-funded services through the grants, and some of the free clinics that I established were originally established as a part of DISRIP, but even when the project went away, the clinics kind of outlasted it.
Did you ever work with any hospital or the county with the 1115 waiver?
Yeah, that was kind of the DISRIP partnership that we did, yes.
All right, let me make sure. Well, congratulations, great job.
Thank you.
Could we get the presentation taken down, please?
Oh.
And Dr. Rice, did you have a question?
I just did a brief moment. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Rahman, for a presentation, a great presentation, great work. I was interested on your slide 4, the mortality rate for breast cancer in COG7, those 19 counties is 50% higher than the others, essentially, or almost 50%. And wondered why that is, you think. And Ramona, this might be a conversation for kind of another time since we have a packed schedule today, but I was interested in the idea of regions that have sort of, significantly higher mortality rates for some cancers. And
so, that, and if you look at, there is some very stark data about cervical cancer incidence as well. So what I had done, I mean, obviously this is somewhat conjecture in people's opinion. I brought that to the attention of a lot of our partners who are on the ground to take their input as to why they think that is. In COG7, it's some interesting, I don't know how the dynamics of that area works, but access seemed to be the very big issue. There are some counties, at least specifically closer to Eastland area and things like that, where, so Hendrick system does a good job on outreach, for example, from Tyler, but what was happening is in their minds, there were lots of counties that were not able to touch, but the assumption was that those people have access at Dallas and they're going to Dallas. But when I talked to the CEO of Eastland County Hospital, their thought process was that lots of these people are getting treated at Hendrick and Tyler. So some of the low-hanging fruit was that the right hand was not talking to the left hand. And so there are pockets of these populations that actually have no access. It's one of those things, everybody thought somebody would do it and nobody did it. So now that we're talking to each other, my hope is that we'll put a dent in it, but the key factor seems to be not poverty. Actually, they have very good programs to cover for financial help and things like that in both these places, but it was the access getting out in the community which was the issue. Now, since that area is only 1 year, 2 years old at this point, from our standpoint, I think that it will be a while before we see a dent in that number, but that is a very stark observation, I agree.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Rahman? Okay, thank you, Dr. Rahman. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Roberts will provide the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. Since the books were published, we have had one event to call to your attention. At 9 o'clock last night, we finally received the instructions for preparing our legislative request for appropriations. That request is due on September the 25th. So beginning tomorrow, if not this afternoon, the fiscal staff and I will begin going through the instructions and preparing the document in accordance with them. On page 3-4 is the routine report on funds available. Prior to your action today, we have nearly $129 million available for grants, for awards. Award grants. The Program Integration Committee is recommending $115 million in awards for all 3 of the programs. If you approve the PIC's recommendations at the meeting, we will have a balance of almost $14 million unused from our FY 2021 appropriations for grants. CPRIT will carry this amount forward by law for use in future years. On page 3-5 is a report that I expect you will be seeing for at least several quarters going forward, and that is our response to COVID-19. I won't go through each of the items. It's a rather lengthy report, but I will call out a few highlights that we do at the staff level expect to continue a mandatory remote work policy. I also expect us, at least through the November Oversight Committee, to continue using video conferencing for the OC meeting. We will continue this unless directed otherwise by state leadership, which does not appear to be forthcoming at this point. In accordance with the process established by state leadership, we do record all of our reimbursed grantee expenses related to COVID-19, and we do submit expense reports to the Legislative Budget Board and the Governor's Office. To this point, those reports have been relatively de minimis, but that has to do with the time period that closed. The period that ends in August, we anticipate those expenses to increase significantly. Leadership may consider requesting from FEMA or other federal entities reimbursement for those expenses, but that is something that will be off in the distance. Our funds, of course, are limited to supporting cancer research and prevention projects. Accordingly, we have not made any grants specific to researching the coronavirus. However, like all science, knowledge gained from cancer research may reveal unanticipated insights into unrelated medical or scientific questions, such as posed by the virus. Several recent examples of CPRIT grant projects that are contributing to the global hunt for COVID-19 treatments and vaccines are provided in the attachments, and I believe you will find those quite interesting if you take time to take a look at them. Finally, as reported a couple of weeks ago on the July 31st special meeting, we are beginning the 2022 Program Priorities Project in the CPRIT 2.0 planning process. What is provided on page 3-9 is the same timeline you've already seen, and no further action is required at this time. With that, Mr. Margot, unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? I don't see any hands up. Well, the chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report. You're muted, Vince. You're still muted. There you go.
How about now?
You're okay.
How about now? Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. You'll find my compliance officer's report behind tab 4. And just a couple of things I wanted to point out in my report today. The first being our delinquent reporting. You may recall that we receive roughly 560 reports on average every month. And as of the end of July, we had about 20 reports that were outstanding, 19 of those in academic research and 1 in product development research. That is below our threshold. We have a 5% threshold, sort of a self-imposed threshold, and that represents about 28 reports. So we are below that. We do meet on a weekly basis internally and discuss the delinquent reporting and work with grantees actively to identify any issues that are preventing them from submitting their reports. So we continue to be on top of that. The second thing I wanted to bring to your attention is on page 4-3. We have completed our first round of our grantee risk assessment and our FY21 monitoring plan. If you turn over to 4-4, you'll see kind of an overview of our risk assessment. Our three main risk factors that we look at are financial exposure, entity maturity, and prior experience. You can see how the factors are weighted and then the criteria that are associated with each of those factors. And on 4-5, you'll see sort of, again, our first draft of what that will look like. We have priority rankings of 1, 2, and 3, and that really determines how we will approach and address monitoring for that grantee for the coming year. Mr. Margo, that's all I wanted to point out. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burgess? I don't see any hand. Mr. Montgomery, are you raising your hand for a question?
Oh.
Yes, trying to figure out where the mute button was. Mr. Burgess, very quickly, the chart that you gave us, is that the same as the one that we got from the auditors, or did you guys do it independently? The auditors, our outside auditors, who we're going to speak later, do have a chart very much like this. And I just wondered if yours was similar or independently prepared.
Independently prepared.
Great.
Now, to put it in context, Weaver did help us with this back in 2015, the original. So that may be why you see some similarities. But we do this independent of Weaver.
Great. I think that's the right thing to do. Thanks very much.
Yes.
Craig, do you have a question?
Just a quick question for you, Vince. Looking
Yes.
at your priority rankings, it seems like most of the universities and academic centers are priority 3.
Correct.
And most of the companies are priority 1.
Yes, that's correct.
And I was just wondering, why is it like that?
Well, based on, if you look on page 4-4, based on the type of grants and if they've had advances, and there are several criteria that weigh into that. And if you think about it in terms of kind of when we look at which type of grants poses more potential risk. And so what we find is that a lot of our academic institutions already have processes built in place to in terms of contracting and grants. And a lot of our companies, this is a foreign concept to them, and they don't have a lot of policies and procedures in place. And so they do present a higher risk for spending the money and making sure that they do it in terms of the grant contract. And so we're definitely pay a little more attention to our product development grantee.
Thank you very much.
Turning to the certification of award slates that we will consider today, Mr. Burgess, will you provide the compliance certification report for the academic research, prevention, and product development research awards?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Margo. My compliance certification you'll find that in the grant award booklet, and that begins on page 107, and that memo is dated August the 6th. My compliance certification details each step in the process, the application process, beginning with fee receipt, compliance, approval of the RFA, all the way through the program integration committee. And, as I was preparing this, I realized that quarter after quarter, I pretty much say the same things. And, but let me assure you that quarter after quarter, it is a unique set of data and documentation, and you don't want your compliance officer to get too creative. So rest assured that we review the compliance pedigrees, as I just mentioned, our third-party observer reports, We have conflict of interest sign-out sheets, post-review statements, attendance sheets, and we cross-check that with review council chair letters, program officer letters, and so it's a lot of data. We do a lot of consultation with GDIT, our third-party grants administrator, CPRIT program staff, until everything checks out. And so it's definitely a group effort. So I never want to bore you with the same thing. But nonetheless, after reviewing all the supporting documentation and in consultation with CPRIT staff and GDIT staff, I'm satisfied that the application review process that resulted in the mechanisms that are recommended by the PIC followed applicable agency administrative rules and laws, and I certified the academic research, product development research, and prevention award recommendations for the Oversight Committee's consideration. I do also let you know, comment that earlier in fiscal year 2020, there were 13 awards that were deferred by the PIC, and they considered those at this meeting, the August the 4th meeting. And so you'll find in your proposed grant award booklet, I also included the certification from February because I certified those award mechanisms back in February. With all that said, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Anyone have any questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you, sir.
The chair recognizes Dr. Wilson to provide the academic research program update and introduce the program integration committee's grant award recommendations. Jim, you're muted. You're muted. There you go.
Yeah. I'm going to focus this report on the Program Integration Committee's grant awards and recommendations, and we'll ask you to follow along with me on the PowerPoint that's before you, and there'll be page references that provide more detail than I'll be speaking to, but hopefully we'll communicate to you this very exciting group of awards. And the first slide shows you that there were 13 awards, as Vince has mentioned, that were deferred from the February PIC meeting from the first cycle. This was to assure that we had sufficient funds to cover all recommendations, and I'm very pleased that all Scientific Review Council recommended awards have been also recommended by the PIC. We also will be presenting 28 awards from the second cycle involving 4 different mechanisms and 11 recruitment awards. The program priorities that have been identified are shown here. They cover all of the academic research program priorities, and I'll leave this for your review at a later time. But again, as I mentioned, all program priorities are represented. Next slide, please, Patty. The 13 awards that were deferred represent about a quarter of the Scientific Review Council recommended awards from the first cycle. These were based on merit scores, and all are shown here on table 3 through 6. There are 8 awards in the category of individual research awards. You'll recall that these are awards that represent a variety of cancer research initiatives from basic mechanisms to therapeutic targets. There's a category of individual research awards focused on children and adolescents. 2 such awards are recommended here, as shown on page 11. 1 award in the clinical translation category, shown on page 12, and 2 that focus on prevention and early detection, shown on page 13. Overall, this represents a 13% success rate for all of the Cycle 1 applications that were reviewed last year. Moving on, in the second cycle of this year, there were 4 different mechanisms that were reviewed. Several of these are going to be mechanisms familiar to you, such as the one shown here, high impact, high risk awards that are represented on page 14 through 15. Recall that these are awards that are relatively limited funds over 2 years to support new ideas that often come from investigators that have not been in the cancer research area in the past, and also represent a number of institutions that are not represented by the investigator-initiated awards. Today we're proposing, or the PIC is proposing 17 awards, and it's notable that, as I've mentioned, that there's 14 different institutions across Texas represented in this award group. The next slide is a program represents recommendations based on the Mechanism Collaborative Action Program to reduce liver cancer mortality. Recall that this was a program mechanism that was introduced last year to address opportunities across Texas to engage investigators in identifying better practices for prevention and early detection. CPRIT funded a coordinating center that is led by Dr. El Sirach, who you've met in the past at Baylor College of Medicine. And these 3 awards represent additional research components of this program. It's notable that these 3 awards all have a focus on identifying high-risk groups to better implement screening techniques and other mechanisms that are known to have impact in early detection and hopefully mitigating the progression from cirrhosis to hepatocellular cancer. The first award shown here, 200-554, is to Dr. Singhal and UT Southwestern, proposing the development of a cohort of 3,000 individuals with cirrhosis who they will follow to understand biomarkers that have promised to helpfully identify those at higher risk. This particular cohort will be developed from individuals seen at UT Southwestern, Parkland Hospital in Dallas, the Baylor Scott and White program in Dallas, and Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. The second CAP Research Award is to Dr. Todd Wall at Baylor College of Medicine. Similar to the first, this program will identify a cohort now of 6,000 individuals with cirrhosis, with the goal of identifying the patient as well as environmental risk assessments that are associated with high-risk groups such as ethnic disparities and rural disparities in patients with cirrhosis progressing to hepatocellular cancer. These individuals will be identified from health systems in Houston, Dallas, and involve multiple groups throughout the region served by those individual medical centers. And the third CAP research program is led by Dr. Thrift at Baylor College of Medicine. This is a genetic epidemiologic effort to identify both the genetic risk associated with development of fatty liver and cirrhosis associated with progression to liver cancer, but also to integrate that information with environmental factors that may interact with that genetic risk. It involves a cohort of 1,500 patients from 8 academic and community practices from Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth area, and El Paso. These three projects then join a project that was awarded to MD Anderson, Dr. Wang, at last year, and represent now 5 individual awards to, I think, in a very exciting beginning to this collaborative action program focused on bringing both investigators as well as patient resources from across the state to hopefully better identify those risk factors and hopefully strategies to mitigate the development of liver cancer early in the process. The next slide is the recommendations from the Core Facility Support Award mechanism shown on pages 17 through 19. This is a mechanism that's been in place at CPRIT for the full history of the program and provides important resource development for technologic and expertise important in developing and supporting cancer research at research institutions throughout the state. The award is for up to $4 million over 5 years, and there are 4 awards recommended here. The first is to Texas A&M Health Science Center in Houston, led by Dr. Peter Davies. It's a renewal of the program for computational drug development that has had a remarkable run of support of now 60 individual researchers in the Texas Medical Center focused on identifying better early therapeutics that have led to 17 new research awards, over $45 million in non-CPRIT support for this research effort, I think demonstrating the leveraging opportunities that these core facility support awards represent. The second award is recommended to Methodist Hospital Research Institute. It's for a core facility that is being recommended for renewal for providing the underpinning required for RNA therapeutics development. As I think many of you appreciate, RNA therapeutics has been an area of great promise for early drug development, and this core is a unique resource in both discovery of effective RNA-based therapeutics, but also understanding their potential in both animal models and in clinical trials. Third award recommendation is to Baylor College of Medicine, Dr. Chen. It's a new core facility that has been developed at Baylor College to address the challenges and opportunities that are offered by understanding the epigenetic control of our DNA. And I think it's understated to say how important the understanding of epigenetics is now in terms of both diagnostic as well as therapeutic targets for addressing cancer. And then finally is a Core Facility Support Award recommended to Texas Tech Health Science Center campus at Amarillo. This program, led by Dr. Bickle, is providing high-end imaging capabilities for both animal as well as cellular discovery, used now, proposed by a large group of scientists in the School of Pharmacy and in the emerging School of Veterinary Medicine. The next group of recommended awards is shown in the next slide and represents a new mechanism the Early Clinical Investigator Award. This award was instituted to address a observation that our recruitment program had been very effective in recruiting basic and physician scientist investigators, but had little representation of clinical investigators that were trained to provide leadership in clinical trial development. And this is actually reflective of a national issue that clinical investigators are being challenged because of the increased burden of clinical care at our medical centers, and quite frankly, the limited effort that is being made by many of the training programs to provide the background necessary to be an effective clinical investigator. In an effort to mitigate this issue in Texas, this program will provide up to $1.5 million over 5 years to support the salary of a medical or other oncologist who aspires to develop a career in clinical investigation, provide mentorship support, support augmenting expertise through didactic studies, and then also requiring the design and conduct of a clinical trial to launch this individual's career. 4 awards are recommended here. 1 to Baylor College of Medicine, Dr. Lula, a hematologic malignancy expert. 1 to UT Southwestern for Dr. Shai, a medical oncologist. And 2 to MD Anderson, Dr. Tang, a radiation oncologist, and Dr. Palaskis, a cardiologist who brings cardiology skills to a clinical investigative program that will align with the development of new therapeutics that often have cardiac toxicities, particularly notable in the new immune therapeutics, as well as some of the older drugs that are so effective in cancer care. Next slide brings us to the recruitment awards. And the first group are the Established Investigator Awards. There are 2 awards being recommended here. The first is to Houston Methodist Research Institute to assist them in the recruitment of Dr. Jeffrey Pollard from the University of Edinburgh. Dr. Pollard is a fantastic potential recruit, an expert highly renowned for his exploration of the tumor microenvironment and how the immune system interacts to either discourage or encourage cancer development. The second is to UT Health Science Center at San Antonio to assist their recruitment of Dr. David Gaius from Northwestern. Dr. Gaius is a physician scientist leader, radiation oncologist, who would take on a position of translational research leadership at the Long School of Medicine in Mays Cancer Center. I should add that both of these individuals not only are exceptional scientists, but also bring a history of success in program development and a commitment to mentorship. Next slide is a group of 9 first-time tenure-track faculty recommendations. You can scan the merit scores that the Scientific Review Council assigned after reviewing their applications, and you'll note that the extremely high enthusiasm for this group of individuals. 4 are being recruited to Baylor College of Medicine, 4 to University of Texas Southwestern, and 1 to UT Health Science Center San Antonio. And you can then scan down and see the programs from which they are coming, again, representing a very robust group of individuals who are highly accomplished early in their training and bring great promise for launching their careers in Texas. I'm going to pause for a moment to ask if there are questions about this group of recommendations. I realize that 52 awards and 10 mechanisms, that it's a whirlwind of information, but hopefully I've given you a overview of the both the care of the review process, but also the excitement of this panel in terms of not only the research being supported, but also the breadth of the different types of mechanisms that CPRIT is investing in building the cancer research prowess in Texas.
I can't tell if there are more. Craig, go ahead.
Thank you, Jim. These are really fantastic recruits. Congratulations. Just had a quick question. I think you were brought in on this, that there was articles in the newspaper a couple of weeks ago about the universities having hiring freezes. And will these hiring freezes affect the ability to recruit these excellent candidates?
We don't believe so. We've checked in with the different institutions involved, both here and also prospects going forward. And I think it's very important to point out that the CPRIT funds that are available allow institutions to leverage their very tight resources to attract these individuals. And so none have indicated any reticence about continuing the research or the recruitment program. And I might add that during the last 2 quarters, our recruitment nominations have actually been as high as at any time. I don't know exactly why that is, except that I do believe that the opportunity for the CPRIT funding puts Texas institutions in an incredibly advantageous position in recruiting the kind of talent that you're seeing here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, can we take down the presentation? Are you through, Jim, with your presentation?
I had one more. I've been asked to combine this. This is a separate topic, but in interest of time, asked to combine it with this presentation. And basically is a request for bridge funding for one of our research training awards. Just as background, as a consequence of the delay in our renewal applications for the Research Training Award program, this particular program at UT Health Science Center in Houston, which is training prevention expertise and researchers, will be facing a 3-month budget hiatus because of, again, that delay in the Research Training Award process. And it does affect a significant number of their trainees, 9 doctoral and 3 postdoctoral trainees. And so the request for this $172,601 is to continue their support in a Research Training Award program that was highly recommended at the time of the initial award and will be recompeting this fall. So with that, I am finished, and you can take down, take down the.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Wilson? Okay, we're gonna vote all at once on all of the awards, prevention, research, and the private sector ones.
Sorry, we're going to follow the same script. We're going to do the academic research first.
We are going to, you want me to follow the script?
Follow the script.
Okay. Forgive me, I pulled a Montgomery on you. I remind members that Mr. Burgess has certified compliance of the academic research award process. It is my understanding that no oversight committee member reported any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that members have not reported? Members, you have a list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Academic Research Grant Awards. We'll approve the PIC's recommendation if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. There are 10 academic research award slates constituting 52 grant recommendations. Rather than taking a separate vote on each grant mechanism, I will ask for a vote to approve all the slates If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendations separately from the vote on all the slates, please make a motion to do so now. I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following academic research grant award mechanisms: Collaborative Action Program Research Awards, Core Facility Support Awards, Early Clinical Investigator Awards, High Impact, High Risk Research Awards, Individual Investigator Research Awards, Individual Investigator Research Awards for Childhood and Adolescent Cancers, Individual Investigator Research Awards for Clinical Translation, Individual Investigator Research Awards for Prevention and Early Detection, Recruitment of Established Investigators, and Recruitment of First-Time Tenure-Track Faculty Members.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff, and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Dr. Wilson presented the proposed award supplement of $172,601 for CPRIT Award RP 160015. We will approve his recommendation if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. I will entertain a motion approving an award supplement not to exceed $172,601 for CPRIT Grant Award RP 160015.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. The chair recognizes Mrs. Maggid to provide the Chief Prevention Officer's report and present the PIC's prevention and award recommendations.
Good morning again. You can find the prevention program update in tab 6 of your booklets. And it's a brief report. The expansion of Cancer Prevention Services mechanism is now open for applications, and then cycle 2 RFAs will be released in October. After hearing Jim's report, I'd also like to point out that 2 of the 3 awardees in the CAP program for liver cancer are also prevention program award recipients. So there is a lot of collaboration between the programs in the liver cancer arena. I will now present the PIC's recommendations of 8 projects totaling a little over $14 million. These can be found on page 52 of your proposed grant awards booklet. All of the projects address one or more of the prevention program priorities. There's one recommended project under the tobacco control and lung cancer screening mechanism, and it is to Texas A&M University. It's for the provision of smoking cessation services and the prevention of secondhand smoke exposure among rural, low-income pregnant women and their families in the Brazos Valley. The Review Council recommended, and the PIC agreed, that the project should include an objective to include postpartum smoking cessation as well, which this will be addressed during the contract negotiations with the awardee should you approve the award. There are 7 recommended expansion of prevention services to rural and medically underserved population projects that have been recommended by the PIC. There are 2 HPV projects. They're both from UTMB, both expanding to different areas of the Rio Grande Valley. One of these projects is school-based, while the other's target population is postpartum women. Both have been very successful programs in the past. There are 2 colorectal cancer screening projects that are expanding. One in rural central Texas, it's out of UT Austin, and the other is to East Texas. It's out of Baylor College of Medicine. Both will offer education, navigation, as well as the screening and follow-up to treatment if necessary. UT Southwestern's Moncrief Institute is expanding its cervical cancer project in North Texas to cover 67 counties and will now also include HPV education and vaccination. The final two projects address multiple cancer types. The first is a project from Texas A&M Health Science Center. It'll expand its breast, cervical, colorectal cancer, and hepatitis screening project to 21 counties with education and outreach. And they have a network of over 450 community partners, which is quite impressive. The project did propose skin cancer screening, but the Review Council recommends providing just the education portion for skin cancer screening because there are no current national guidelines for population-based skin cancer screening at this time. And the final project is one from a nonprofit, the Light and Salt Association based in Houston, that focuses on the Asian American population and will address colon, breast, cervical, and liver cancer, as well as offering survivorship services. I'm happy to answer any questions about the projects, and then the prevention program also has a request for supplemental funding that I will go into when I've answered your questions. Seeing no questions, I'll move on to the request for supplemental funding for PP 170094. This is a colorectal and cervical cancer screening project directed by Dr. Maria Ibaja Weiss of Baylor College of Medicine. They have requested up to $125,000 in supplemental funding to continue the program while their expansion application is submitted and under review. The project's population is that of the Harris Health System, which is the safety net hospital and clinic system for Houston and Harris County. Dr. Weiss had planned to apply for funding, but CPRIT withdrew the request for application in April. In addition, there were colorectal cancer screening capacity issues at Harris Health, as well as there were extensive administrative changes that added to the delay in the application. So this request is brought to you for supplemental funding of up to $125,000. I'm happy to answer any questions. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, turning to the prevention award recommendations, I remind members that Mr. Burgess has certified compliance of the prevention award process. It is my understanding that no members have reported any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that members have not reported? Members, you have the applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the prevention grant awards. The Oversight Committee will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the members agree. We will consider the two slates together unless an Oversight Committee member wishes to take up any recommendations separately. I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following mechanisms: tobacco control and lung cancer screening, expansion of cancer prevention services to rural and medically underserved populations.
So moved.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
We didn't have a second. Who seconded that? We got the second. Okay. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract and negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contract on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Mrs. Maggot has presented the proposed award supplement of $125,000 for CPRIT award PP 170094. We will approve her recommendation if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members present and able to do so, to vote do so. I will entertain a motion approving an award supplement not to exceed $125,000 for CPRIT grant award PP 170094.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the member, the motion carries. Dr. Walker Peach, will you provide the product development program update and introduce the PICS grant award recommendations for product development research grants?
Thank you very much, Mr. Margot. Happy to do so. If I may have the first slide, please. Thank you all and good morning. The Product Development Research Group will be bringing to you today 3 matters forward. The first one is the Cycle 21.1 update. The second will be the Cycle 20.2 award recommendations and a program recommendation. In light of our time constraints, I'll be running through all 3 of these matters before taking a break and accepting questions. Next slide, please. So you will find, hopefully we'll get the next slide available here. You will find the update to, next slide please, Rosemary. You will find the update behind tab 7 of the 21.1 update in your, I think we're having some problems with the slides here. So we'll try and get to these. Looks like we've lost a few members as well. There we go, perfect. Thank you very much. So you'll find the update behind tab number 7. Yes, please, next slide. Thank you. As a reminder, you have already, the Oversight Committee during the last Oversight Committee member meeting approved the release of all 3 of the RFAs associated with product development. That's the Texas Company Product Development Research Award, the Relocation Company Product Development Research Award, and the SEED Award. Next slide, please. The critical components of this are these dates, however, and please, folks that might be listening in outside, please take note of this. We will release our RFAs November 9th. We will hold a webinar November 19th to answer any questions about any of these RFAs for people that are hoping to apply. The web portal will open to accept applications on December 2nd, and critically, it will close to any new applications January 27th. Please make note of that date, January 27th, 2021. We'll start our peer review process and bring forward for any nominated awards a year from now at the August OC in 2021. Next slide, please. Now we'll talk briefly about actually a lot about the award recommendations for 20.2. You will find these in your booklet starting on page 67. As a reminder, we did offer all 3 of the product development program RFAs in Cycle 20.2. Next slide, please. We have a multi-stage peer review process. We started in January 29th of 2020 in this process, went through screening protocols, an in-person application, which was reduced to a virtual teleconference due to COVID in the April timeframe, where we held 2 panels, followed by diligence review in July, and then the pick on August 4th to culminate to today's recommendations. Next slide, please. In the next slide, you will find the application data for each of the mechanisms that we offered, the Texas Company, the Relocation Company, and the SEED Company. We had a total of 28 applicants in the 20.2 round. 28 of those applicants went through our entire process, resulting in 2 that we will bring forward. The resulting funding success rate is 7.2% if you look at the total numbers. So 2 out of 28 applicants will be recommended today, or 8.4% if you look at the total dollar volume, which is $25.4 million in recommended award funding out of $301 million across all 3 of the mechanisms that were originally applied for. So slightly lower than our average. Our average usually is just shy of 10, just south of 10%. So we're a little bit low on this particular funding round. So 2 of these applicants have been nominated to move forward for your consideration for funding. Next slide, please. The first of these applicants is a company called OncoNanomedicine. Probably sounds familiar. This would be the 3rd award to this company. The budget request is just shy of $10 million. This is a company that is spun out from the University of Texas Southwestern and is headquartered in South Lake, Texas. They are focused on tumor visualization agents. And the particular indication here is for identification of metastatic disease as indicated there on the slide. This company has been with us for a number of rounds. There are no contingencies that have been recommended by our reviewers for this company. But I do want to draw your attention that they are a recipient of 2 earlier CPRIT awards. The first one was in 2014 for $6 million. The current award that you're considering today is a follow-on to that particular award. The second award from 2019 for almost $15.5 million is for a completely different type of project. It's not a visual indication, it's a vaccine project using the same technology. So that is the first award that we bring forward. The next slide, please, will indicate our second awardee. This is a company called Immunogenesis. The title of this is the bioreductive bispecific PD-L1, PD-L2 antibodies that are active against both hot and cold cancers. Hot and cold cancers refer to the amount of T-cell infiltration. Hot cancers would be head and neck, for instance, and lung. Cold cancers are some of the big ones: pancreatic, prostate, ovarian cancer, and many of the breast cancers are considered cold cancers, where traditional immunotherapy, that's very cool new technology that's been around for a short amount of time but works pretty well, tends to work well in hot cancers and not so much cold cancers. This group is bringing forward a new type of immunotherapy drug that will address both hot cancers as well as cold cancers. The PI is Michael Curran. He is a faculty at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. This is a spin out. They anticipate the spin out will be located in Houston. The disease indication for this particular technology is all cancer types. This is very exciting. There are some contract contingencies that the reviewers have put forward. One is to build out the management team of the company a little bit more, very specifically around hiring a chief medical officer. And they'd also like to see the IND be cleared prior to moving the contract forward. So this is our second award nomination bringing forward to the Oversight Committee today. So the next slide, please. These are our 2 nominees for a total budget of around $25.5 million. 2 things I want to note here. The fundamental basic research that allows these companies to move forward was supported by CPRIT academic research, as well as other federal awards from the National Cancer Society and the National Science Foundation. Neither one of these companies would be around today without that original creation event, and that was supported early by CPRIT as well as others, something to point out. Both of these companies will use the CPRIT funding to support drug development, manufacturing, clinical and non-clinical studies, as well as clinical trials. In the case of OncoNano, that's a phase 2 trial. And in the case of Immunogenesis, that's a phase 1 trial. So I want to move forward now. So that's the end of the award nominations we're bringing forward for your consideration. We do have another matter, next slide please, to bring forward, and this is a program recommendation on how to handle OncoNano going forward. Next slide please. In your booklet behind tab 8, you will find a series of memos, the first of which is from me, detailing the reason why we need to engage a third-party group to help us understand what the revenue sharing terms for a third award in product development might be. In other words, we've already made 2 awards to this company. The first one was using our standard revenue sharing terms. The second was, again, our standard second award revenue sharing terms. However, if the Oversight Committee were to move forward with approving this third award to OncoNano today, that would make CPRIT a major shareholder in this company. And there's a different risk-benefit analysis that needs to occur. And so my memo details the need, I think, to engage a third party with that type of expertise to help us understand what the revenue sharing terms should be. The second memo that you'll find is from Wayne Roberts. And Wayne, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. This is a follow-up to Cindy's comments to ask the Oversight Committee for authority to transfer the management of Onco Nano over to the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company. You have done these previously for 4 or 5 companies. I will add that in specifically 2017, the Texas legislature authorized CPRIT to transfer management and disposition of the contracts to the Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company because of the extremely high level of expertise and competence they have in managing this kind of portfolio. So we will be requesting your approval of the resolution making that transfer.
Thank you, Wayne. So with that, we have addressed all 3 of the matters that we're bringing forward to the Oversight Committee, and I'll pause now to accept any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Dr. Walker-Peach?
I've got one quick question, if I may.
Dr. Rice?
Cindy, did you say that we already have equity ownership in Onco Nano, or I wasn't sure if that sentence is what you said, or if we're thinking about it. Do we already have equity ownership into the company?
We don't currently. No, that's not part of our standard terms for either first or second awardees.
I just thought I heard you say that. I just wanted to correct or understand.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I want to remind members that Mr. Burgess has certified compliance with the product development award process.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, I just have one quick question.
Oh, Dr. Hernandez, go ahead.
Yes, sir. The assets that the trust currently holds is how much? Is that 50 billion that they hold currently as assets, the trust?
I do not have offhand the amount.
It's on page 8-3. I was just wondering if they oversee 50 billion assets. Number one, does that ever feed back into CPRIT at any point?
Okay, yes. Yes, any revenue sharing that the state receives as a result of these contracts does not come directly to CPRIT. It goes to the Texas Treasury that can only be appropriated by the legislature specifically to pay down our debt. It can only be used for that purpose, as I said, under the direction of the legislature.
Thank you for that clarification. That way we can talk to our legislators, because we really want to reward our institution for its great work, and maybe we can find a way to bring some of that money back. Since session is starting in January, we might as well talk to them about that.
It is my understanding that no member has reported a conflict of interest with the proposed product development award recommendations. Are there any conflicts of interest that members have not yet reported? Cindy, can we take down the presentation? We can see each other better that way. Thank you. Members, you have the applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the 2 product development research grant awards. The Oversight Committee will approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the members agree. We will consider the 2 proposed awards in one vote unless an Oversight Committee member wishes to take up the recommendations separately. I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for product development research awards to Onco Nano Medicine and Immunogenesis as presented by Dr. Walker-Peach.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiating authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff to authorize the CEO to sign award contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Members, Mr. Roberts notified the board on August 13th that he seeks authority to disperse grant funds in advance to the 2 companies we have just approved for awards. Are there any questions from Mr. Roberts regarding his request? Pursuant to the General Appropriations Act, Article 9, Section 4.03A, subsection A, I would Do I have a motion to authorize CPRIT to disperse grant funds via advanced payments to Onco Nano Medicine and Immunogenesis upon execution of the award contracts and the successful completion of tranches?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Walker Peach and Mr. Roberts discussed their recommendation regarding Onco Nano's proposed revenue sharing terms and using the trust company to assist CPRIT in the negotiations. Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve the resolution transferring management and disposition authority for Onco Nano to the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company and for the payment of a fee?
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Chair recognizes Mr. Graves to present CPRIT's internal audit report and the FY 2021 audit plan.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy to present to you the progress and updates for internal audit for this year. A couple of things of note for you that are new from our last presentation to you is the status of our internal audits. The governance internal audit that we have been performing this year, our field work is complete and we're in the reporting and wrap-up stage. We anticipate that that will be completed by the end of this month, and we'll bring that to you and the official report at the next Oversight Committee meeting, as well as our disaster recovery and business continuity planning, consulting and advisory engagement. That engagement or that audit will cover the business resumption, resilience, and disaster recovery functions of the agency. The internal audit follow-ups for this year, we have finished the state reporting follow-up. That's the third item on page 9.1 in the second section of our table there. We completed our follow-up procedures and we're able to evaluate and demonstrate that the agency has remediated both the low findings for state reporting. And then with the last two follow-ups over communications and information security, as you recall from the last Oversight Committee meeting, that those procedures were delayed to allow the internal department for IT at CPRIT to support the agency and the remote work functionality. And so we have delayed those and anticipate being able to start those this month. And then those wrap-ups of those will be completed in the next fiscal year. Before I move on to any other, well, I'll just move on and allow questions at the end. We have also updated, if you look on page 9-3, we've updated the chart of our internal audit findings for all the follow-ups, and you'll see where the state reporting follow-up reflects that all findings have been remediated. And at the very bottom of that table, you'll see the summary of all the open findings that remain for CPRIT from all prior internal audits. And you'll see that we have the information security follow-up and then the three communications findings that we still need to complete our follow-up on. And those are the two that I just talked about that we'll complete in the next fiscal year. Additionally, in this last quarter of the year, we performed an a risk assessment update for internal audit. And so that is where we have reviewed all the key activities for CPRIT and sat down with management and looked at the risk profile of the agency, and based on that risk assessment, developed an internal audit plan for the next 2 years. And so you'll see on pages 9.4 and 9.5 of your handouts that we have created this plan in conjunction with management to look at and be able to assist the agency with preparation for the sunset review, also to perform an audit over IT general controls, and to perform an advisory engagement over records management specific to grantee compliance records and the onboarding of compliance information from third parties into CPRIT's environment. So those would be the three internal audit and advisory activities that we have recommended to be conducted in 2021, as well as the follow-ups over all the outstanding internal audit engagements and our annual report. And you'll see in 2022, we have recommended and presented on page 9-5, the post-award grant management area and application development and management internal audits. And so it's been a couple years since we've looked at grant related processes, and it would be time again to go revisit the grant management cycle, as well as perform follow-ups on any of the open findings that we have for the prior internal audits. So those are, in summary, the 2021 and 2022 proposed internal audit plans that we'll be asking for your approval of. Additionally, we have received guidance from the State Auditor's Office. They published their guidance for the annual internal audit report on August 13th. It was a little bit delayed. Historically, they've published that information around August 1st. Since we've received that, we have evaluated it and didn't identify, or we have not identified any significant changes that would affect CPRIT's annual internal audit report. So with the approval of the internal audit plan, we can then include and complete that report and present it to you at the next Oversight Committee meeting for your approval before we have to provide that to the State Auditor's Office, the Governor's Office, and the LBB. And that is an annual requirement that is due in November. So with that, those are all my planned remarks, and we'll open for any questions.
I have a question, Mr. Graves. I noticed that on the proposed internal audit report, you've got governance rated high, and I can't tell whether you're talking about internal oversight or external oversight.
Governance rated high. Oh, from our plan, that is based on the risk assessment. So when we complete the risk assessment, we provide a high, moderate, or low composite risk rating over the probability and impact of several different risk factors. And so that is just the inherent risk related to the agency. That is not necessarily a post-review assessment of the audit. That is just the assessment based on the inherent risk assessment, which is a pre-audit risk rating. So that I don't want that to be alarming that we think governance is high risk, but that's how it came to be on the internal audit plan from our risk assessment.
Mr. Montgomery.
I think that the risk from governance is substantially reduced since we got rid of the old chairman and put in someone new.
I didn't want to bring it up, but I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Is the right point to address my name being taken in vain, or is that off the agenda?
It's not on here. I can't do anything that's not printed. I can't.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt the presentation.
Chairman, do you need a motion on this?
If there are no questions, is there a motion to approve the report, the follow-up report over state reporting?
So moved. Sorry, just for clarity, I was meaning the motion related to Will Montgomery, not the motion for this.
Oh, okay. I thought you were trying to move it along, Dr. Rice.
No, God forbid. I was just thinking about a motion for Mr. Montgomery's concerns. I apologize for the interruption there.
That's all right. We can talk about it in our executive session. Okay.
Definitely.
Is there a motion to approve the follow-up report over state reporting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the FY 2021 internal audit plan?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present his appointment to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committees.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. I have provisionally appointed Dr. Clark Chen to the Scientific Research and Prevention Programs Committee, as it is referred to in law. Our statute requires you to approve the appointment that I've made. The nominations subcommittee discussed this appointment at its meeting on August 14th, and I request your approval.
I'll offer a motion to.
D, you're muted.
I'll offer a motion to approve Dr. Chen's appointment to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committee.
Seconded.
Forgive me for continuing under muting. Is there a motion to approve Dr. Chen's appointment?
Yes, sir. So
Second.
moved.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the FY 2021 honoraria policy.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. This issue has been discussed with all three of the program subcommittees in detail at a very high level. We adopt the honoraria policy for our peer review services on an annual basis. The last one was adopted a year ago at the 2019 meeting. CPRIT staff has revised the one for 2021 to reflect workload changes for the review council members due to the continuing effects of COVID-19. The proposed FY 2021 honoraria payment structure does remain the same as those approved for FY 2020. However, it's important to note that we project an estimated $500,000 reduction in overall peer review costs in FY 2021 due to the academic research and product development research programs each holding only one cycle instead of the regular 2 cycles. I, as I said, discussed this with the subcommittees who appear to support the honoraria policy, and again, I request your approval.
You're muted, D.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Is there a motion to approve FY 2021 honoraria policy?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the Health and Safety Code Section 102.1062 waivers for FY 2021.
Thank you, sir. Behind tab 12 are the requests for 4 waivers. All previously have been approved by the Oversight Committee in prior years, some of them over the course of a number of years. Very quickly, they include our purchaser, Don Brandy, Dr. Hellerstadt, the Department of State Health Services Commissioner who serves on the PIC, and then a general waiver for the review councils, and then Dr. Wilson, the Chief Scientific Officer, related to his son serving on the staff of one of the institutions. All apply to very specific situations, and all may be rescinded by the Oversight Committee. I request your approval.
Any questions for Mr. Roberts? Is there a motion to approve the 4 proposed Health and Safety Code Section 102.1062 waivers?
So moved.
Second.
I note for the record that Mr. Montgomery did not vote.
Sorry.
I don't know if that,
Yeah.
He voted.
is that a Doyle?
That's my fault. Sorry.
The leftover from last year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
But
You okay with that?
yes.
I strike the last sentence. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. The chair recognizes Ms. Eckel to discuss the proposed administrative rule change.
Thank you. Members, we just have one proposed rule change for this meeting, and it is in 703.25. And it would require, when a grantee requests a budget change or transfer, approval of any budget change or transfer. Currently, if that request is 10% or less, that the request is automatically approved. So we're just tweaking that so that all requests require institute approval. And if you approve it today, we'll publish it in the Texas Register and then bring it back for the November Oversight Committee meeting. And that's it for the rule changes.
Are there any questions for Ms. Eckel? Members, is there a motion to approve the publication of the proposed change to Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 703 in the Texas Register?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. The chair recognizes Ms. McConnell to present the Chief Operating Officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. The Chief Operating Officer's report is under tab 14. I think most of it is standard, so unless you have any questions, I'll kind of move on to the FY 2021 agency budget, which is on tab 14.9, and in that same section, and just highlight that this will be the budget for the next year. There are adjustments to it, kind of in line with what we've done in prior years. You'll note that there's a almost $2.5 million adjustment to move money from the research grant line item to the grant review and award operations line item. About $2 million of that you already approved. That was related to the contract with CSRA International, now known as GDIT. And that contract is about $9.9 million. You approved that in May, and we sent the letter to the Legislative Budget Board for approval for both the contract as well as for the transfer amount. We have actually received approval from the LBB on the contract itself, but we are still awaiting approval from them for the transfer. The other items in that almost $2.5 million transfer are for honoraria. That's about $254,000 in honoraria increases that were originally approved for the current fiscal year, FY 2020. So you approved this last year, as well as the $150,000 for an interagency contract for the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company that we just discussed. So that is the full $2.5 million. And then you'll also see there's a $20,000 adjustment from travel in the grant review and award operations, moving that up to the institute operations. So that is a reduction in the travel since we're not having, we're doing all the peer review meetings by video conference this next year, and applying that $20,000 money funds to the training budget, and increasing the training budget from $25,000 to $45,000 for this next year for the 3 grant programs, so that they have some additional funds to attend some conferences. So that will be the 2021 operating budget, unless anybody has any issues.
Members, are there any questions for Ms. McConnell? Moving on to the next agenda item, Ms. McConnell, will you explain the recommended contract approvals?
Yes. So there are 7 contracts in 6 areas. These are for services related to grant review and award operations, the contract with Icon Clinical Research for the product development, due diligence reviews, as well as the Baker and Botts and Udell Isidore contracts for legal advice and evaluation services related to intellectual property evaluation for the product development research grant applications. We also have the contract renewal with Hahn Public Communications of almost $150,000 for strategic communication services, The renewal with the Perriman Group for an economic assessment of the cost of cancer, which is statutorily required. And the contract renewal with Weaver and Tidwell for $186,000 for internal audit services, which is also statutorily required. The final contract is again the interagency contract with the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company for $150,000 in authority. We are required to get approval from the Office of Attorney General for the outside legal services contract renewals, and the contract with Weaver and Tidwell will require delegation authority from the state auditor's office. One other thing to note is that the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company contract for $150,000, we will be including it in a letter for approval to, as mentioned on the 2021 budget, for authority from the LBB to move that money from our that research grant line item up to the grant review and award operations budget line item. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. McConnell? Members, is there a motion to approve contracts with Icon Clinical Research, On Public Communications, BakerBots, Udell Isidore, the Perriman Group, Weaver and Tidwell, and the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Company?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Cutrone will update on CPRIT's communications. Will you update us on CPRIT's communications activities?
Good morning, Mayor Margot and Oversight Committee members. I'm Chris Cutrone, Senior Communications Specialist for CPRIT. You'll find the communications update on page 16.1 of your packet. I've included a summary of earned media coverage, the list of highlights and clips following the report. Also, I'd like to include that communications is working with IT on several projects related to the website that focus on making the website more interactive for grantees. There is also a breakdown of social media stats over the last 30-day period. I would like to add our LinkedIn and Twitter presence continues to grow in both followers and engagements and conversations overall. With that, I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Cutrone? Okay. Moving on to the next agenda item, the subcommittee assignments for FY 2021. Are there any questions? You all have seen that. It was sent to you on Monday. Are there any questions? Members, is there a motion to approve the new subcommittee assignments for FY 2021?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We will not take up standing agenda items 21 or 22, so we'll move on to agenda item 23. The proposed dates for the Oversight Committee's regular quarterly meetings and the subcommittee meetings for FY 2021 are in your meeting packet behind tab 18. The next regular Oversight Committee meeting will occur on November the 18th. CPRIT expects to hold the November meeting again by video conference. Is there a motion to approve the proposed meeting dates for the regular meetings of the Oversight Committee and the subcommittee for FY 2021?
So moved.
Did I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Motion carries. If there is no further business and there is no objection, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The meeting stands adjourned at 11:08 a.m. Central Daylight Time.